Are you worried about which path to take? Do you face a challenge that seems impossible to solve? Perhaps doubts are knocking on the door of your heart, and you no longer know how to handle them. This sense of uncertainty is common, and in the Bible, we find many people who went through similar moments, questioning which direction to follow and where to find peace. Jesus, aware of how the human heart becomes troubled, offered words of comfort to his followers. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. John 14:1. He spoke these words at a critical moment when his disciples were filled with doubt and anxiety. They didn't know what the future held, and insecurity began to take hold. With this invitation, Jesus wasn't asking them to ignore their challenges, but to trust in God amidst the uncertainties. He calls us to look beyond daily worries and place our confidence in Him. Even today, this message resonates with anyone facing doubts and fears, showing that we can find rest when we entrust our concerns to God. You may wonder, but how can I trust something I cannot see? How can I believe there's a plan if I can't see the direction? Jesus understands this difficulty, which is why he invites us to experience faith, even if it's just with a small step. He knew that by surrendering to this trust, our hearts would begin to find peace, and faith would become an anchor in stormy times. This journey isn't about having all the answers, but about beginning to trust in God, as the disciples did. It's about accepting that, although the path may not always be clear, we can have faith that He guides us. It's an invitation to, instead of being consumed by doubts, build a deep trust in a God who cares and is present in every detail of our lives. When we think about faith, it's natural to wonder how far it can take us. Does it truly have the power to transform our lives? In Matthew 21:21, Jesus presents a remarkable lesson about the reach of faith. He said, "If you have faith and do not doubt, you can say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' and it will be done." This statement sounds radical, but brings an essential truth for anyone seeking to understand the power of trusting without hesitation. This passage teaches us that faith is not just an abstract belief. Jesus used the fig tree as an example to show that when we believe, things can genuinely change. Here, he challenges us to consider how our faith can transform our reality. It's not about literally moving mountains, but about understanding that there are situations in our lives that seem insurmountable, and with faith, we can find the strength to face them. For those unfamiliar with the Bible, this kind of confidence might seem distant, but in reality, this is a journey of small steps. Faith doesn't strengthen overnight. It's built through experiences and a willingness to trust in God, even when we don't have all the answers. Jesus' teaching here is an invitation to believe without letting fear hold us back. It's common for doubts to haunt us, making us question whether we can truly trust that something greater is watching over us. Jesus knew this, and that's why he encourages us to go beyond our doubts. He shows that faith is a choice, a decision to trust that even in situations that seem difficult or impossible, there is a God who sees everything and acts in our favor. Reflecting on this, we realize that faith is like a muscle. It strengthens as we decide to believe, even if it's just one step at a time. Jesus invites us to move our mountains, whether they are doubts, fears, or challenges. And this movement begins within us, with the choice to trust. We all experience doubt at some point. The Bible introduces us to Thomas, one of the disciples who dealt with it in a very human way. After Jesus' resurrection, Thomas didn't believe what the other disciples were saying. He wanted to see for himself to believe. In John 20:27, Jesus, understanding his doubt, invites him to touch his wounds and says, "Stop doubting and believe." Thomas's story is one of the most well-known examples of skepticism and faith. It shows that Jesus understands our doubts and doesn't condemn us for them. On the contrary, he welcomes Thomas with patience and offers him proof of his presence, inviting him to experience a faith that goes beyond what can be seen. Jesus knew Thomas needed this reassurance to overcome his insecurity. This passage reminds us that, often, we want proof before we believe. It's a natural instinct in human nature which seeks security in what is tangible. Jesus understands our need for visible answers and doesn't abandon us when we hesitate. However, he challenges us to go beyond physical sight, asking us to trust in his word and his promises. For those unfamiliar with the Bible, the message Jesus conveys is clear. Even when we can't see God's presence, we are called to believe. Thomas was a relatable figure, someone who dealt with genuine doubts, just like all of us. And Jesus, in his kindness, gave Thomas what he needed to believe, but also showed that true faith often surpasses the need for tangible proof. Jesus still invites us to believe without seeing, trusting that he is present. It's an invitation to open our hearts and understand that faith is not the absence of doubt, but a decision to move forward, even when certainty seems distant. Like Thomas, we are challenged to turn our doubt into trust, knowing that even without seeing, we can believe. The Bible teaches us that for our faith to be strengthened, we must ask with confidence. In James 1:6 we read, "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." This verse highlights that faith is not just a belief, but a firm and confident stance before God, without hesitation, even when circumstances test us. When we ask God for something, it's natural for doubts to try to weaken our confidence. Restlessness and fear often arise when we pray, but James reminds us that God wants us to approach him with firm certainty. He knows that doubts can undermine our confidence and leave us insecure, like a wave unable to stay steady. For those unfamiliar with the Bible, this teaching can be a practical encouragement. Doubts often surface because we want control over everything. However, James invites us to surrender these concerns to God and trust that he will respond according to his will. It's an offering of the heart, a decision to believe that God is faithful and that his promises will be fulfilled. Jesus taught that when we ask God with faith, he listens. This doesn't mean we'll always get exactly what we want, but that by trusting in him, we receive peace to face any situation. This kind of confidence is cultivated through constant prayer, learning to release our anxieties and rest in God's presence, knowing that he hears us. This faith without doubting is what strengthens our spirit. James invites us to trust fully, and this practice of asking with faith helps us grow spiritually. As we draw closer to God, our faith becomes firmer, like an anchor that sustains us. We learn that in every prayer, we are strengthening ourselves to face challenges without being swept away by doubt. The Bible reminds us that faith is essential for a life aligned with God. In Hebrews 11:6 it's written, "Without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." This verse reveals that faith is not just a single act, it's the foundation that draws us closer to God and connects us to the purpose he has for us. Having a complete faith is much more than occasionally believing. True faith shapes how we live, allowing us to see every challenge as an opportunity to grow closer to God. For those who may not be familiar with the Bible, Hebrews shows us that faith is the path to experiencing the peace and guidance that God offers to all who sincerely seek him. Complete faith involves recognizing that we are not self-sufficient and that a greater purpose guides our lives. God calls us to trust him with all our hearts, for he is faithful to fulfill his promises. Even if we don't understand every detail of his will, faith invites us to believe that he rewards us when we choose to walk with him, surrendering our uncertainties. This pursuit of complete faith is an invitation to live a life filled with meaning. Throughout the chapter in Hebrews, we see stories of people who, through faith, faced enormous challenges and achieved victories that seemed impossible from a human perspective. Each of these stories teaches us that God honors faith and responds to those who draw near to Him, trusting wholeheartedly. As we cultivate this faith, we are not merely seeking answers, we are opening ourselves for God to guide our path. Complete faith takes us to a level of trust that goes beyond human understanding, where we find the true meaning of our existence. It's a journey of surrender and trust that transforms how we face every aspect of life. Faith is a constant invitation to trust in God, even when our doubts pull us toward fear. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we read, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." This verse reminds us that trusting in God requires humility and a willingness to surrender control to Him. To trust the Lord with all your heart means not relying solely on our limited understanding. Many times, our logic and reasoning prevent us from seeing what God is doing in our lives. This verse guides us to let go of our need to control everything and allow God to lead our steps. It's a surrender that requires courage, but brings peace and security. For those who may not have a deep familiarity with the Bible, this passage from Proverbs teaches us that when we acknowledge God in our paths, He aligns our journey. This means that by placing God at the center of our decisions and seeking His direction, we find a safe path. He promises to make our paths straight, showing that He is with us in every decision and guides us when we trust. This complete trust is more than a momentary choice. It is a daily practice. Throughout the day, situations arise that can tempt us back to fear and doubt, but Proverbs reminds us to rest in God, believing that He knows what is best for us. This surrender, trusting without hesitation, renews our strength and brings us clarity. This trust in God not only strengthens us but also transforms us. As we learn to trust the Lord with all our hearts, we discover that He is faithful and just, and that His wisdom surpasses our understanding. This kind of faith brings us peace to face any situation, knowing that God sustains and guides us. The Bible shows us that faith impacts not only the spirit, but also the body and mind. In Proverbs 3:8 we read, "This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones." This promise reveals that by fully trusting in God, we experience a profound well-being that reflects in our physical and emotional health. The peace that comes from a solid faith transforms how we handle stress and anxiety. Many of us have felt the impact of fear and insecurity on our bodies. Worries can wear us down, affecting our health in tangible ways. But when we learn to trust in God, our hearts find rest, and our bodies begin to reflect that peace. Faith generates a kind of serenity that calms the mind, relieving the weight of worries and allowing our bodies to renew. This teaching from Proverbs encourages us to see faith as a foundation for health and balance. When we trust that God is in control and hand over our concerns to Him, we discover a strength that revitalizes the body and strengthens the mind. Trusting in God shows us that we don't have to carry the weight of difficulties alone, bringing relief and energy to face challenges. The Bible teaches us that faith, by transforming the way we think, also affects our physical state. When we stop struggling alone and rest in God, we notice improvements in our health. Anxiety, which often affects us negatively, is replaced by renewed vigor. This is the power of a faith that by transforming the heart also strengthens the body and mind. Thus, Proverbs reminds us that faith is not just a matter of belief, it is a source of life and strength. It renews and sustains us, allowing us to experience holistic health. The peace and strength that come from God are essential for living fully, keeping our faith as the foundation for every aspect of our lives.